Fragmentation incarnating into successive generations. Now to the examples of generations in America. I have chosen these examples because they have received enough public attention that they are known to many. Because they had denials that need to be looked at now, not surprisingly, because they are incarnations of group I have already mentioned in this book. These people all had denials that incarnated as children in their families, which is why I want to give these examples now. When sexual relationships take place in the presence of denial, you may not get the spirit you think you are going to get when you have a child. Most of the children born of these relationships are not really spirits. They are fragments of spirits or denied will of the spirits involved. They have karma with their parents and they have reflections to give. How lovingly or unlovingly the reflections are given is dependent upon the judgment held in the situations and the amount of love present in the judgments. If these families have love among the fragments, and just lack understanding on how to keep fragmentation from happening, they feel more complete as a family unit. If there is lack of love and acceptance toward the essence that has fragmented, these families are more comfortable separated from one another than they are when they are together. Some of these people have so much guilt that they do not allow themselves to know whether they like one another or not. These spirits fragmented when they felt they could not handle everything at once. Some of the denials held by the fragments are loved by the parental part of the spirits, and some are not. Some of the greatness these spirits originally had was denied into fragments when guilt told them to diminish themselves. The progression of generations here followed the progression of the denial in the parental parts of the spirits involved. What one generation could not accept in itself, the next generation reflected in a state of denial. The first generation involved here came to America in droves. They had an adventuresome, inventive, pioneering spirit that wanted to make themselves a better life. They tried various lifestyles as farmers, pioneers, craftsmen, artisans, and merchants and traders. They began building America into what it is now. Some of these people had an affinity to the Indians in many ways that are not recorded in history or brought forward much anymore. The problems between these newcomers to America and the Indians were at first, basically, because there were so many of the newcomers that the Indians felt crowded by their lifestyles. The Indians had the feeling of being pushed back to make room for the newcomers, and these Indians then made other tribes feel pressured to move back also. The newcomers had left Europe to gain religious, personal, and economic freedom. They had been unable to prevail with the establishment there, and had decided to seek a better life for themselves by leaving their problems in Europe. These people had a desire for a fresh start, and a lifestyle that was less restrictive by rules and limitations. They also had religious misunderstandings and sexual guilt that were not moving at the time. These spirits had much of their wills in the state of denial, just as they have had from the very beginning. They wanted to allow only the feelings that felt good to them, and they believed these emotions were the only ones that were acceptable to God. These people had sexual energy, but they did not believe it was right, so they held it back as much as they could. Even so, they had many children because the guilt involved here dictated this as the price they had to pay for having sexual relations. The children these parents parented reflected their parents' guilt to them and made the parents feel that their guilt was right. What the parents thought that they had left behind in Europe had very quickly reincarnated into their lives again. Their children had the desire to bring limitations and rules back into their lives again, and one of the main arguments they used was there were now too many people to continue with the old ways of letting individuals govern their own lives. This generation wanted to pass laws, fence the land, regulate business, and increase government in general. This guilt generation told their parents that they were going to have to step aside because their children had the ideas needed to organize the country and to give it the form it needed to progress in the vision their parents had given, but could not manifest without their children's help. The parents here had faced this reflection before in Europe and had no better idea how to heal it then than they had when they faced it again with their children. The guilt was not recognized then, nor was it known that underneath the guilt lay denied emotions that were empowering their fragments. For example, fear was being held in a state of denial when these people left Europe. Their fear had been judged as something that would hold them back. In trying to leave their fears behind instead of taking them in and healing them, the fears had received the judgment that they were not to move and show themselves for what they were because fears were limiting, unacceptable, and a sign of weakness. The children who were holding these denied fears did not then present themselves as being afraid. Instead, they had a very annoying look of weakness to them that most of their parents did not allow themselves to see or respond to. This next generation continually justified itself in the face of every argument their parents could present, and had a feeling of self-righteousness which was actually infuriating, although the response to this was denied as unloving. If response had been given in the presence of the unrecognized guilt, the parents would have been punished for being unloving toward their children. These children succeeded in having their way. They placed limitations on life in America that were designed to limit movement to the levels that the fears could handle. The fears, then, did not have to feel themselves or be triggered into motion, but the expansionism and the freedom their parents had felt without this reflection could not continue either. Since balance had not been found within, the imbalance was always manifesting outwardly, by giving first one side of the upper hand and then the other side. The problem with this approach is that there is no movement or evolution involved, only compromises and a taking of turns, so to speak. This generation of guilt was holding denied fear and also denied anger. The guilt that was not allowing the emotions to move made it appear as though fear and anger were entities, separate from one another, and unable to mingle and balance because of the lack of real movement. The fear fragments made and enforced the rules, sometimes with the help of certain kinds of anger fragments. Most of the denied anger manifested as a parallel batch of fragments whose lives made it appear as though all the limitations and rules were necessary. When this guilt generation of denied emotion had children, they gave birth to more denial. They had children that were fragments of denied greatness that wanted to rush ahead in everything that was trying to hold them back. Their parents were very strict with them and tried to invoke religion to control them. These children began in small ways and grew into the great era of entrepreneurs, builders, and far-sighted investment bankers. Their imbalances made it appear that another round of limitation was needed. The next generation was another guilt generation that fenced the ranges, moved the Indians onto reservations, had a war over states' rights, and forced law and order into places where it had not been before. And of course, the anger fragments made it look like the shutting down of expansionism was right, because their abuses were even more extreme than the imbalances of the fragments of denied greatness. When this guilt generation had children, they had another generation of denials. The children born to these parents were also fragments of the first generations that I gave as examples here. They were also part of the denied greatness I mentioned earlier. The parental parts of the spirits who denied this greatness in themselves did it because they are not able to handle all of their own greatness unless they move their fear of their own greatness and power. When the self cannot accept something in itself, it feels it is wrong to have it. This feeling allows guilt to move in and tell the spirit involved that it is right to deny itself in this way. Guilt told these spirits that they had too high an opinion of themselves, that they were too much and they needed to diminish themselves. Guilt also told them that the fear was to let them know that they were not right to go ahead as they were. Fear is meant to hold you back, but moving fear does not hold you back indefinitely. It allows you to go ahead as you are ready to move. Moving fear does not mean getting it out of the way and going ahead in spite of it. When this happens, the fear goes into a state of denial where it does not move. It then acts like a separate entity that holds the spirit back from what it wants to do, because it is the way that fear has been judged. In this case, the spirits who denied it go ahead of it for a little while, and then it is manifested in front of them and began telling the spirits whose fear it was, why the fear would have to put limits on them again. The generation that had denied fear and the guilt about having the fear also had plenty of sexual repressions involved in the denials it was holding. There was also a parallel batch of fragments holding the denied anger, which gave the reflection that it was not right to be free because someone abused the freedom. The generation of denied greatness gave the impression of being less sexually repressed than their parents, but they had overridden their guilt to give this impression. Their guilt manifested in the form of increased diseases which made them think that their parents had been right. This generation also had an increase in reproductive problems that gave the impression that birth needed to take place in hospitals or might not be safe. Although this generation had many inventors, innovators, and creative people that brought America into what could be termed the modern world, they still had denials involved that did not allow them the success they could have if they attained the balance that healing is needed to bring now. These people had a generation of guilt for parents who held them back, in many ways, from attaining the full measure of success they were seeking. The generations of guilt stayed in power for a long time by telling their parents they must step aside in their favor, and then telling their own children they must listen to and respect the authority of their elders, because they didn't have enough sense to see that they were headstrong and about to run away with themselves. The fragments of greatness got held back by the fear and guilt of the ones who had originally judged themselves unable to handle all of their greatness at once. The generations of guilt held back the generations of greatness and separated them from one another because these spirits could not go past their own fear and guilt in this way. I am, of course, giving a simplified version here, but you can begin to see how individual spirits projected parts of themselves forward until the projecting parts are pulled into the line up again. The spirits involved here have been attempting to learn something, and now it is time for them to understand what they have been doing. The generation of innovators also had a world war to fight, but I do not want to go into that now because it will make the example too complex. You will get the complexities as you go along. When this generation had children, they had a guilt reflection also. This generation tried to do everything right. They wanted to have lives that were the most proper ever lived. They had presence in Victorian times, but I will not go into that now. They tried to give the American dream an evenness and conformity that their children later rebelled against. They also had a war to fight, and they won it. They were honorable and dutiful. They raised their families in the suburbs, safe from everything they hated in the city. They had a feeling they had to do right by their children. They gave them everything, including a good education from the very beginning. They got involved in the schools and in their communities. They got the people they like elected by going out and voting en masse. They had intent to give the American dream the best thing it had had yet, another generation of hard workers who were even better educated than they were. They begat the hippies instead. They were horrified to find that everything they had worked to give their children was going unappreciated. Their children were throwing it all away for drugs, sex, and rock and roll. The parents thought the children had a feeling that nothing was good enough for them because they didn't appreciate what they had been given. They didn't want to work. They wanted to loaf instead. They didn't want to pay taxes. They wanted to take the government for everything they could. They didn't care about law and order. They demonstrated and started riots. Instant gratification was all they cared about, and they didn't care how they got it. The rebellion of their children caught these parents almost totally by surprise. They had thought their children were going off to war, and they burned their draft cards instead. The hippies and those who sympathized with them had a desire to restore some color to life, and most of their parents did not appreciate the creativity in all of this. They wanted to punish them and force them back into the mold they had so carefully prepared for them. Many hated the hippies at first for cheating them of the fruits of their life's efforts. These parents wanted to punish these children, and they had the law and order establishment to do it. They had a desire for them to go and fight, whether they wanted to or not, and they had the draft to make them do it. And they wanted to stop them from using drugs, and they had the police to do it. They could not stop them from having sex, though. All the sexual denials they held so dear, so the proper life was being thrown in their faces, and they could not seem to stop it. The parents hated these children for that especially. Hysterectomies took place in record numbers on young people during those years. The hatred the parents were feeling got denied into others who were willing to do what the parents' hatred wanted done to teach their children a lesson. The kids' reactionary sexual expression had the denied guilt that drew the punishment. The kids got mad, but they did not win. They got put down whether they knew it or not. Who were those kids and where did they come from? These kids were the generation I already mentioned who had started this country, and also a good many Indians who felt they could not live the way they wanted to live in an Indian form anymore. Why did the hippies fail again to gain and maintain the freedom they had so much wanted to have? Because they had denials that had fragmented out and guilt that had tried to push out, which manifested as the ones that opposed them. The ones who brought the hippies down from every trip they took were manifestations of their own denials, which took whatever form their judgments instructed them to take. The generations on both sides had the guilt that manifested in between and told them that they had to hold themselves back, that it was wrong to expand freely, and they had to have regulations and limits put on them so they would go forward in an orderly manner. The guilt fragments reflected judgments held by those they were limiting. There were many judgments here, but the core consisted of the belief that free will was immoral and selfish, and that doing what they wanted to do was chaotic and impossible in the presence of others. Fear and anger that was not moving held these judgments in place, so that guilt could use them to oppose freedom of movement here. The judgments were held in a state of denial by the ones who had denied their emotions in favor of their desire to go forward. The fragments of lost will manifested the reflections that made all of the judgments seem to be true. Guilt holds back people who have not moved the reasons they need to be held back. Some understandings on the role of sex in fragmentation. Healing needs this fragmentation to end. To end it, sexual relationships must become wholly acceptable in the sight of God, no matter what form they take, and self-acceptance must replace denial. To do this, you need to recognize the denials involved which are not recognized, or the outward manifestation of opposition to your purpose could not be happening. It is important to understand that orgasm can manifest fragments, whether you have a child or not. The energy involved can go to another fragment who already has affinity for the denials involved. If you are not fragmenting into your own children or giving birth to fragments you have already created, you are still losing essence if you have denial involved in orgasm, and everyone does. This essence has to find a home, and it will go to the magnetic energy that draws it in. This essence may go to a stranger who has a magnetic draw for what you are denying. Rage has frequently done this when it breaks loose, if guilt is not strongly present enough to keep it from moving. There is a particular kind of self-righteous rage, which has denied guilt, that often goes out this way to punish the ones it holds responsible for how it feels. This is a blaming rage. It does not feel guilty at the time it is expressing the rage side of the cycle. Because this rage is going out in a denied state, it has no acceptance from the ones denying it. Rage of this sort is accompanied by an entire set of instructions in the form of judgments, but the one I want to mention right now is a judgment present in one form or another that says, "This rage is not really me. I'm somebody else when I rage like this." Many spiritual leaders have cautioned against allowing yourself to feel rage, but this gives it even more serious denial than if you allow yourself to know you have it. Rage needs to gain acceptance with the ones who you are really feeling it, and then be healed there. When denials stay closer to home, they often continue to empower fragments around you. Many of these fragments could not even have children if they weren't receiving denied essence from the parental part of the spirit involved. The hippies had orgasm in the presence of denial and the use of drugs, particularly when drugs were used to go past feelings that would have held them back when they were not drugged, often caused more fragmentation than if they had not used them. The hippies had a generation of guilt for parents, and the hippies had a desire to throw off guilt and act out everything their parents had not allowed in themselves, and everything they themselves had not done in their earlier lives. The hippies actually had essence their parents had denied, which was actually their own essence, returning to empower them to try it one more time. The hippies later got caught in many of the same guilts their parents had when their reactionary phase lost its steam. The children conceived during the reactionary phase of the hippies have been reflecting the feelings of the hippies were denying. Whether or not hippies are the biological parents of these children, the offspring of their generation is growing up now as the new wave, punkers, and also the right-wing conservatives that have even gone into fundamentalism under the leadership of the guilt generation. The punkers and the new wavers have the rage and undercurrent blame of the hippies that is too guilty to move, but wants to make a statement nonetheless. While the anger pretends it has no fear or guilt, the right wing has the denied fear which holds the guilt present. The breadth of the split in the manifested forms here reflects the split in the parental part of the spirits involved between their own rage and fear. This gap or split is filled in by guilt and blame that attacks both the self and others in recognizable phases. You need to understand that your rage and fear must come together for the place of true power to be found. As long as there is imbalance here, power is imbalanced. The way to bring balance here is to allow yourself to feel rage and terror until the fear and terror breaks into anger and rage of its own accord. Let the grief that needs to surface here surface in an atmosphere of acceptance also. It is something to say about your feeling toward power. If you have rage first, allow the same process in reverse. Rage until you feel fear and terror, and allow the grief. A word of caution is needed here. I do not regard it as wise to go forth and unleash these emotions on the ones that are triggering you, unless you have full understanding of what you are doing, which you do not yet have. The role played by fragmentation is just being introduced to you, and there is much more that must be understood. I have also told you not to hold back emotion that gets triggered in you, and this is not wrong advice either. For the time being, you need to allow these emotions at home or in a place that feels safe to you. Here are a few more understandings on the examples I have just given. Not only were the hippies and those who sympathized with what they were trying to accomplish the same people as the first generation I mentioned, but they had fragments that wanted to hold back and fragments that wanted to go ahead of them, incarnating in the intervening generations. The amount of contact these fragments have retained with one another will determine whether the parental part of the spirit is able to recall and feel these lives as fragments, as though the parental spirit had lived them also. Hippies and those who sympathize with them are not unilaterally the parental parts of the spirits involved, but they have a higher percentage of parental parts than do other generations I have mentioned. As long as the fear and rage is denied, judged against, and laden with guilt and blame, the parental part of the spirit always appears to be victimized by the fragments that want to hold it back and overshadowed by the fragments that want to rush ahead of it. The parental part of the spirit is exhausted with this struggle, and has the choice now of giving up and declaring guilt and the manifestation of their own denial as the winner, or to understand how they have created this struggle for themselves, and take the necessary steps to heal it. Most of the hippies have realized that the forms they gave themselves during their youth were forms from their own reincarnational past, when it was in its positive swing. Many hope that invoking the power of these forms all at once would somehow invoke the power to prevail this time. The strength of the denials here is immense and cannot be put aside this easily. Many who still want life only want it if they can have it without the reversals they have struggled with for so long. Many who took the spiritual path told themselves that they just needed to do more work on their spirits, and then they would find the happiness they sought. The path most have taken have been fraught with the same misunderstanding the seekers already had. These paths fade the will presence because their intent is to do this. Lucifer has control of these paths, and even if many are only misunderstanding rather than of evil intent, he is still able to gain tremendous power by using the denied will essence, the paths of discipline and denial, hand to him. A common misunderstanding here is that denial and affirmation will increase power. You cannot get rid of something that is yours and expect to heal with missing parts. I have been repeatedly mentioning Lucifer to many who want to tell me that they don't believe in evil. Recognizing your own fundamentalist fragments will let you know that part of you lives in the fear of the power of evil, and the rest of you has rationalized this fear away, because another way to handle it was not known. You have to learn who your fragments are, and how they fit into your life patterns, to know how much denial you really have. You need to understand denial in stages. It cannot all be taken at once. Anything you have the ability to recognize as you study the reflection around you is something you have the ability to use now to further the healing. But you are going to have to learn to do more than just recognize it. If you have to get it wrong first in order to get it right, that is not wrong either. If it had not needed to happen, it would not have happened. But this does not mean it is beneficial to continue allowing it to happen once you begin to realize how to have some power in a situation. If you do not allow yourself to regain personal power over your destiny, Lucifer will take you to a place of complete personal powerlessness. Lucifer loves making people feel they have no power over their destiny, and that anything other than a willless surrender is a travesty against God. If hatred can love anything, it loves the power to punish others. The surrender to whatever happens that denies the personal will is Lucifer's supreme opportunity to punish others, because it brings death sooner or later to everything that gives up its will in the mistaken belief that God requires this. This is a place of no self-love, and I cannot help you there. I appeared not to accept the will at first, but this is not a full enough picture of me to understand why I appeared to be this way. There are some who want to say to me that I have overstated the situation with the will, and that they have intent to heal, and that intent to heal is all that they need. It is true that intent to heal makes a difference, but healing cannot manifest until you understand how to heal yourself. No one else can do it for you. God is not going to magically bring down earth changes and heal everyone on earth, thus ushering in a golden age. Nor do you enter into the golden age by just putting in your time, so to speak, until the old golden age somehow appears. The golden age cannot be experienced by you unless you have the vibrational power with which to be present there. If you think the golden age is a state of mind, you have given it manifestation in only part of yourself. Many people were not ready to accept this information until they gave it one more try, with the approaches they had tried in the past. You have done it now. You have gathered all the forms you thought would help. You have gathered all the spiritual power you could. You have used many techniques and many drugs that you thought would help you empower your lower levels of vibration. You have given speeches to your lost will. You have beseeched it. You have prayed for it. You have shined light upon it. You have tried to be a living example for it. You have gotten enraged at it and left it behind. You have denied it and affirmed yourself to be no longer troubled by it. You have tried everything you have known to try, including the rationalization that you no longer need to try because there is no place to go and nothing to do when you get there. You have said that heaven is here and now. You have said that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. No matter what approach you have taken, you have died anyway, and even as you read this, you are aging. You must get the lost will to vibrate so that it can receive you. If you do not want to go into oblivion bit by bit, you are going to have to give it in to me now and realize that I have something to teach you that you do not already know. If you still want to insist that you already know it, you are going to go outside of me and find out whether you know everything you think you know or not. Earth has reversed herself for the last time. Healing either comes now or Earth will be lost forever. I have not exaggerated the situations here, so don't dismiss me and then later realize you're sorry you didn't listen to me once again. There is something in the will of spirits on earth that have opposed me for as long as they have existence in me. The opposition to me has been caused by the same thing that has created the reversals in your own lives. The most recent reversals have been mellow compared to the reversals in the past. That is because it is time to heal now. But you also need to understand that fatigue has played more of a role here than you realize. If this period of laying back does not bring real resolution, there will be another skirmish between the spirits and their own denials that will end their existence as spirits. On the other side, if I said that there was nothing to worry about, you would have a feeling that that was not right either. Lost will gives you the feelings of reversal, so that you never get a fully positive or fully negative reading on anything. You are going to have to go through all of this essence and help it align with you, so that you can go ahead without reversals. If you think that reversals happen because you are not sure of yourself, you are not wrong. But you are going to have to understand why the lost will feels as it does, to know how to heal it. More needs to be done than just allowing the will to blow off steam, and then proceeding until the will builds up its next charge. Guilt and death also play a role here that needs more understanding if you are going to heal the damage that they have done. I am going to give you some understanding on death now that you have not already had. Some understandings on death. Originally, Lucifer told the spirits that death was nothing, and he was right. Death is nothing. Lucifer then told the spirits that had nothing to fear. He sneered at the ones who feared, and many denied their fear in favor of looking brave in the eyes of others. You have to overcome your fear of death, Lucifer told the spirits, and many took this in and have repeated it ever since. Overcoming fear is important, but it cannot be done by denying it, and then proceeding as though you do not have that fear. Fragmenting your fear out into others does not mean that you do not have fear. If you have been dying physical death, you have will essence that is holding feelings around this. When a person dies, it happens because there is not enough vibrational movement left in the will to enable the spirit to stay present anymore. When there is no longer enough movement left for the spirit to express itself, the spirit has been taking the route of breaking off from the parts of the self that are no longer vibrating and leaving with what still has enough movement to be able to leave. When this spirit reincarnates, it does so with less essence than it had in the past. Essence has been lost along the way, and you are going to have to go back and get it now. The spirit essence that has remained alive does not have the experience of death within itself, so death does not seem real to it. The spirit has to go back and get the will essence that has experienced being taken over by death, and this is the essence I am speaking about now. When Lucifer said that death is nothing, he shamed the will into feeling that it was not right to feel as it did about death. The spirit is not magnetic, and so, to it, Lucifer did not seem wrong in what he had said here. The spirit has been easily able to let go of death and rise above it. Many spirits think they have to reincarnate to teach others how to do this. They have not realized it is their own missing parts that they have to help, nor have they wanted to realize that they cannot tell these parts to do as they have done. The magnetic will energy has quite a different experience with death than does the spirit, and the spirit is going to have to feel the will here in order to know how to help it. When Lucifer said that death was nothing, he observed it, but he did not feel it. It was not his intent to feel anything. He has hatred for the will. He is spirit that hates will. He had nothing but hatred for how the will felt when it touched death, and you are going to have to decide whether you want to go this way or not. The will cannot vibrate in the presence of nothing without feeling the pain so extreme that it does not want to vibrate any more. This has caused the will to stop vibrating wherever it has touched death or nothing. Once a part of the will stops vibrating, All other essence is affected and must either slow down or stop vibrating, depending upon how close it is to the problem. Essence in motion cannot go against essence that is not moving without having pain that makes it want to stop moving. Holding back does not allow the vibration necessary for life, and so once a part of the will stops vibrating, it is only a matter of time until the rest of the will stops vibrating. Movement, such as emotional expression or orgasm, has in the past intensified the pain of the essence, whose vibration is touching essence that can no longer move to open space to receive it. Death itself was taken in very early, before I knew what it was, and the lost will that has been holding this death has never known anything else. When I was trying to find out what I was, what was me and what was not me, I did not know if the darkness had a substance to it that was not me or not. I opened to it, took it in, and asked my will to feel it for me and tell me what it was. I had embraced nothing, but I did not know it for a long time, because the will's response to this nothingness gave me so many impressions that it seemed I had embraced something, and I did not want this something to be a part of me. I originally suppressed the will's response here because I could not stand to accept it. When the will opens to receive and gets nothing, it cannot stand the pain of its experience because it receives the complete opposite of me. The will, in this case, is taken over by a complete lack of love, lack of light, and lack of acceptance for it. No matter what the will does, there is no response to it, and after it suffers the pain of this, it is taken over by the unconscious, because there is no consciousness in nothingness. Since I did not have acceptance for the will here, there was no way the will could receive my light. When the will was first experiencing death, the will's terror was that death had the intent to be as cold and unresponsive as it was, because it could torture the will the most this way. Later the will realized that there was nothing there to contact, no possibility for change or evolution, and that it was totally alone with death unless it could somehow get my attention without having to move so much that it would go unconscious from the pain involved before it could tell me what it was experiencing. My lack of acceptance for the will here did not encourage her to feel that this should even be attempted, because she feared that I meant for her to suffer in this way. The reasons the will felt this way needed to be given later in the story so you can understand them. The will has a terror of opening when it does not know what it is going to receive, because of this initial experience of opening to receive nothing. Lucifer very early on realized what death was because he sought it, not only for himself but for me. He has used the will's terror of death to intimidate it into doing his bidding. I did not realize what it felt like for the will to open and receive nothing instead of receiving me. Spirit cannot go outside of itself to find out, because everywhere the spirit goes, there is light. It is the will that has the ability to go outside of the spirit and experience absence of spirit. When the will receives nothing instead of light, the will has to struggle in that environment until light comes into it. When the will feels that it cannot move, light may even be poured upon it, and the will is unable to open and receive it. The nature of the will is expanding openness, and if this is not filled with light, or even some limited form of light such as judgment, then the will receives whatever lack of love is magnetically drawn in. Once the will took in nothing in part of itself, it closed around this nothing in an effort not to expand into it or feel it anymore. The will did not know that by doing this it was going to kill itself little by little. Because moving essence could not pound against something that was not moving without feeling the pain that would also make it stop moving. Over time, this nothingness held in the will has become very deeply buried beneath many layers of will essence that have stopped vibrating. I have never been able to fill the motionless parts of the will with light because the will has not been able to allow me to touch it here. The pain in the will has been so great when it has tried to move that it has been unsure whether it was receiving me or dying all over again. I want to clarify here that the experience of dying is not the same thing as death itself. Spirit did not understand the process the will needed to clear itself of death, and so did not accept the will here. This has meant that the will's attempts to clear death out were not given light or love by the Spirit. This has conditioned the will to feel that it cannot move death out of the way it feels it needs to without receiving more denial. Spirit has for a long time had guilt that it was a survivor, and will apparently was not. I also thought for a while that the will was seeking death and avoiding me because the will seemed to be so resistant to my efforts to give light. I have now learned how light must be given to this part of the will to enable it to move death out. It must be done in just the right way or it will not work. When I tried to heal the will of this pain in the past, I have thought that it would never be free of this pain or stop nagging me about it. I have healed most of the will in the past, but I have never gotten the will to release the clench of death it has been holding ever since it took in nothingness. Because of this, the will has always gone into a reversal of its healing. This has both infuriated and frightened me. My will also felt rage at me for not healing her and terror that I cannot heal her. At times I have abandoned the will here because I did not know what else I could do. I needed space from her to handle my fear that I was inadequate and impotent to handle the problem, and I needed a detachment to lift into the overview to see how I could help her. The will has interpreted this detachment as a lack of love for her, as abandonment and a lack of concern for her plight. At times I did have these feelings, but overall I knew I had love for her, and I must find some way to rescue her. The will has tried to handle her terror of death by giving in to as much as she could to see if there was any way that she could accept it. She had guilt telling her she must make a place for everything, or she was not unconditional, loving acceptance. The will has not found any way to lovingly accept death. After a long time of trying to accept death and of hiding her feelings about this from me, she has approached me and told me that she cannot bear to hold it anymore. We have finally come together in the understanding that acceptance for death means knowing it for exactly what it is, and accepting true feelings here. The will has fragmented many times, trying to get death out by pushing out the part holding the death. These fragments are overwhelmed by the experience that they had in a result of this. The will has been terrified that death was an incurable disease, because the more she tried to push it out, the more of it there was. This is because fragmenting to get rid of a part that held the death only created more places that were missing their essence and thus were nothing. The will now knows that she has to release the death she has been holding on for so long, and that no will essence that has desire for life is to go with death when she releases it. Death has to go outside of me, and the will knows this must be done by feeding all the essence that has died and bringing it back to life, so that only the empty space that belongs outside of me goes outside of me. Those who still do not want to understand what life is and what death is will have to go out there also and experience the opposite of me. It has not been pleasant for the will to experience nothingness taking over her when light, life, and love is what she seeks. It has been unbearable torture, in fact. To clear the will is going to have to express the emotions that have been held in the essence that took in nothing when it wanted to receive me. These emotions are terror, rage, and an immense grief. In the past, when the will has tried to move death out, no one has had acceptance for the intensity of the emotion involved. Everyone, including me, has tried to get as far away from the will as possible when these emotions have come up. The fragments holding death have been shunned in the same manner. Guilt has made some people go toward this instead of away from it, but they have not gone with the love and understanding they think they have had, and so their presence has been helpful but not healing. Deconditioning the will here is not an easy thing to do, but it must be done, and it must be done lovingly. The will cannot be ordered to stop fearing death and see that it is nothing, because the will has felt nothingness and knows the reality of it better than anyone who just looks at it ever could. This is why we must both have understanding and feeling to have life at all. I have objective understanding, but without will there is no love. The will has love to give in response to my light, and it is not wrong to assume that without will's presence there is no love. Lucifer has personified the hatred that results from complete denial of the will. Glimpses into some of the understandings needed next. This book has been a preface of sorts for what I have to say next. The spirits who have to begin healing first are the ones that emerged first. If they don't start healing, there is no point in holding out hope for the rest, whose emergent story I have not yet given. All the rest of the spirits whose emergence I have not yet given are will-polarized spirits. They complement the spirit-polarized emergence of the Godhead. Having the properties of the will, they are responsive and not originating. They have to get their information later because they have to know that what they have to move is going to be accepted by the spirit polarity. They have desire to heal, and if they receive rejection from the spirit polarity now, they are going to have to come into me. I have room for them, but this is not their first choice because they have merged to be what they are. Guilt is not your reason to heal now, however. You have to feel like it is the right time for you, and that you have a desire to regain what you have lost since you emerged. If you have the feeling that you are a fragment of lost will of one of the great spirits that has emerged already, and you have fear that you are going to die in the form you are in now and go back into the parental part of the spirit, you need to allow yourself to go through whatever feelings you have about this. If you heal as much as you can, you will find out whether you are right about this or not. Understanding is also necessary for the lost will that has fear of this. If you left, you will not go back in until you are ready. If you came into existence by being denied without enough essence from another part of the spirit, you do not have the consciousness that would read this and feel you could heal from it. In other words, the people that are not evolving on earth are people who are denied fragments that cannot heal in the form they are in, or they are spirits who have no desire to heal at this time anyway. Understanding will allow you to go through the feelings you need to go through and survive them. Many denials have taken place in the past when spirits have feared that they could not survive the feelings they were having. If you do have to go back with another part of your spirit, you will have readiness when the time comes. If you are not ready, then it is not the right time, because this time, the essence that goes back together needs to have alignment so that this time it can stay together. I would like to mention also that even though the Godhead spirits all emerged in a sexless form that was more masculine than anything else, the presence they have on earth has polarized into both sexes. The delineation is no longer defined the way it was originally. There is spirit and will polarized into both sexes. I will be giving more understanding on this as I go along. For now, allow yourself to understand this in the ways that seem most logical to you. I have many people I have not mentioned on earth. By far and away, the majority of them are fragments that cannot heal in the form they are in now. The generations that I have mentioned as my example all have presence in the orders that have already emerged. The angels have a relationship with the rainbow spirits that has intent to be loving, but has been permeated with guilt so far. This has to change now. The angels need to understand that I did not parent them more because I favored them over the others. The angels do not need to continue trying to prove that they can do everything on their own without my help, so that they will not look favored. Neither do some of them need to punish themselves for being favored by handing themselves the short end of the stick to prove they can handle it as well or better than the rainbow spirits. Don't forget that emotion has to move around everything that I am mentioning now. Even if you have to help yourself to begin by getting emotional movement any way that you can, the emotion will not be fully cleared until it moves freely and on its own, and in the time sequence it feels it is right. Emotion is not to become a dictator here, but it has a right to its right place, and it has a sensitivity that is needed now. Appropriateness is a gift of emotion when it is not held back and loaded up with old charge. The rainbow spirits need to understand that they have a lot of old charge, even more than the angels have. They have to let it move and not hold back because of the guilt that they have held for so long. The rainbow spirits have a fear of punishment because guilt has given it to them for so many times, but there is no way anyone can escape punishment if guilt continues to be held. Self-acceptance will make the difference here. As you grow to understand guilt, you have to realize that the fear of not being right fed guilt a lot of essence, which is empowering it now. Clearance of this fear will help the guilt presence to be reduced dramatically. You have to accept that death is the way that guilt is going to go. Try not to let any of your essence go with it. Guilt has to find death because it is not really living. Guilt has to receive what it has given others, but the guilt itself will not notice what it has experienced. Guilt does not notice anything except movement, and lack of movement is what it seeks. Guilt opposed me from the very beginning because I wanted to move and to seek to know myself. Guilt opposed my vibration and the expansion of my light, and because guilt is unchanging here, it must now go outside of me. This is the right place for guilt, because guilt has a long way to go before it can accept vibration of any kind. Because of this, there is no way to move guilt itself. Instead, the space that guilt has occupied must be closed to it by the vibration of the will. I want to take this opportunity to show you an example of what I mean when I say that spirits have held images and judgments, which they had thought were full understanding, but were only partial understandings. What if you felt that you had taken in as much as you could, and you believed you had the understanding you needed, and you put the book down now? It would be easy for you to feel that guilt is to blame for everything that has happened in its presence. This is not full understanding, but it is not wrong if you need to go through a phase of feeling this toward guilt. The feeling of needing to look away when you get full is not wrong either. What is wrong is lack of movement here. There is no way I can give you more understanding than you have readiness to receive. But you must make yourself ready to receive more by having the experience you need and moving your will in response, so that there is expansion in which more understanding can be received. If you close around something and hold on to it for long, it loses light. The question of balance demands that I say here that you cannot go through the motions of movement and get the results you are needing unless you understand what movement really is. You are going to learn a lot about this in the next book when you see an entire order of spirits emerge who have confused body frenzy with vibration of essence. If at any time you need to look away and have experiences in order to understand and become ready to receive more, do not forget that understandings have a motion also. They will deepen in time if they get the experience they need, and this deepening brings them more light. The understanding on guilt is going to be this way, as everything else if you really understand it. Guilt is not to blame, even if what happened in its presence makes you want to blame something. Blame is all right to have, but it is only another side of guilt. First it pushes on you, and then you push on it. This has been going on forever and needs to end now. There is no way you can have a successful battle with guilt, but you need to go through all the emotions as though you are having a battle with it in order to get through any emotional charge you have around guilt. Then you will be able to let go, which is the only way it can leave. The opposition guilt has presented has not always been wrong. As long as there's any room for guilt, opposition is necessary. The reason I say this is because I had gaps between myself and my will. As long as these gaps exist, guilt and death are going to fill them. When you have guilt and death present, you cannot move ahead unconditionally because they do not move. If the will is not there to help the spirit move, the spirit does not move, because the will must open the space for the spirit to move into. If you have a gap, then spirit is not filling that space. Whatever the will receives instead is what fills the space. Everyone on earth is seriously gapped from their wills right now. To not be gapped, you must have total self-acceptance that allows total spontaneity. Any time gap between how you feel and when you express it, or any lack of freedom in the expression indicates lack of self-acceptance. Guilt has a reflection to give of how much lack of self-acceptance there is. Going past guilt in the name of spontaneity will not heal you. Guilt is not something you can move past unless you know how. This means full understanding, which I cannot even give you now. So work with what has been given, and know that when you reach your own limit, or I give you one, it is for a reason. Pushing past limits in the name of overcoming fear has extracted a price of death that has nearly cost us the creation. The lost will has not been wrong to hold death and fear either. It is the nature of the will to open, and it has to hold what has been given until a way to change is found. A way has been found now, but implementing is not as easy as it may look. When the will is fully vibrating and the light of the Spirit is filling all the space the will opens, there is no way for guilt to reverse you or hold you back until death sets in. When this is not the case, being held back or even reversed is the right thing. Spirit expanding without will to focus it, guide it, and let it know what it is doing is a death-creating event. There are plenty of examples of undergrounded expansionism on earth right now to teach you what I mean here. Will expanding without spirit to fill it is also death-dealing, since the will has the power to manifest, and will manifest whatever it receives. You have to understand that the arms race is an issue here that has to be solved through the healing of lost will, and yet the will is not to blame here. I don't want to comment on this anymore right now, except to say that I have weariness with allowing myself to be held back, and I must get moving now. If you have looked away from me for so long that you have lost movement in parts of yourself, you need to remember that looking away must be followed by looking back to me again when you have readiness for more light. In this way, you can get the dosage of me that you need without me having to hold myself back for you. The presence of guilt caused me to believe that I must hold myself back until others could catch up. In doing this, I found that everything slows down and nothing catches up. This is a large part of what enabled me to understand that I have manifested spirits that follow me. There is no way they can overtake me, lead me, or even go at the same speed as I do. I have acceptance for this now, and you need to find full acceptance for yourself in this also. You must move at the speed that feels best to you, no matter what that speed is, and so must everyone else. Getting to the place where this kind of freedom can manifest is not an easy thing to do now, because there is so much guilt in the way of understanding how this could be done, and yet it has to be done. I have moved guilt from my spirit, and you have a part of your spirit that has done this also. The piece that have not aligned with this yet must now be healed as they become ready. Having the parental part of what is present on earth does not mean that this is all there is to you. You all have a part of your spirit that has never left the spirit level of vibration, and you need to get in touch with that part of yourself so that it can help you with this healing. Many of you have a lot of healing to do before you can receive my vibration directly for very long at a time. But I'm with your spirits, and they have the ability to relate to you everything that you need. Those that are not going to be ready within the time span of Earth's clearance must go to other planets until they are ready and do their healing there. The spirits who are on Earth, even though it is not their true home or right place, must heal as much as they can here before they can move to another place without leaving too much essence here. If you can listen to me now, you can get the help you need. All of you must forgive yourself for not listening to me earlier and for having overstepped limits I gave you long ago. Overstepping these limits put you in the position you are now facing on Earth. Forgiveness here must be grounded in the understanding that you could not accept the limits you had then, or you would have. You also need to realize that I did not give out limits like an unfair dictator. I found these limits in you and gave you the understanding that they were there. Limits have a purpose, just as guilt has had. You can expand them when you understand how, but you cannot go past them without having to go back eventually and heal the damage done. The past is never past as long as you have lost essence trapped there. If you have not yet experienced the reality of living in several time frames at once, you will as this healing goes on. Bringing all of yourself into the present is necessary, but it cannot be done by ditching the parts of yourself that have not been able to keep up. You have to go back now for the lost will that has lost the speed to keep up with the rest of you by first healing the lost will that is still vibrating, and then going after the essence that is no longer perceptibly vibrating. I cannot give any more right now. If you are in rage that it is not enough, give in to the rage and consider it as a blessing that rage is moving. Anything that helps you move rage is a blessing, because there is more lost will trapped in unmoving rage than anything else right now. You have to understand that rage has been given the heaviest denials and the most punishment of any of the emotions. When it comes out, be prepared for it to have pain and blame, grief, and even a desire to hurt others the way it has been hurt. This is natural, but do not allow it to hurt anyone else. You have to understand that you also have gapped rage that has no light at all. Gapped rage has to be understood later, but for now you need to know that when gapped rage comes out, you don't know what you have done during that time. This has the potential for dangerous situations, and it is not to be allowed to move in the presence of others. Guilt for having it is not necessary, but gapped rage must be given light in stages so that it can heal. If you do not give yourself any more pressure to express emotion than feels right for healing, you will avoid triggering yourself into your gap. The gap has death in it. It's not something to fool around with. You have to have readiness to heal it. Now some of you are going to see this as a limit, and you're going to want a challenge. If you do go past this limit, you have to take responsibility for whatever happens. You cannot put the responsibility on this book or anyone else around you. If you are experiencing situations that feel like too much pressure, you must remove yourself from the situation and do not blame others for having created it. If you have a place in you that cannot yet receive light, it is your responsibility to move back to a place that feels comfortable, rather than insisting that it is the light which must shut itself down. Guilt has succeeded in having the light shut down for so long that most people cannot see how it could be otherwise. The light is central to this creation and has no place to back into. If I compress myself any more, I will not be light anymore. If I have to shut down and hold back, I cannot generate enough light to nourish everything. On the other hand, if you have a limited ability to receive light, there are many places you can go to find a comfortable level of light that meets your needs. Right place is the place that feels most comfortable, no matter what you may have to release to find it. Do not think that right place necessarily means that you are always going to be in the same place. You need to evolve at the speed that feels right for you, but you cannot evolve unless you find self-acceptance first. You are what you are, and pretending to be something else is not going to help you find your right place. Lost will is holding what you have not wanted to accept about yourself. Does this necessarily make you what lost will has been? No. Judgment against the lost will has made it what it is now. It has to be understood that lost will gives the reflection of what it has been judged to be, rather than what it really is. Lost will has received heavy conditioning that it is what the judgments have told it it is. Deconditioning it now is not going to be easy, but it must be done. Guilt is not going to be around much longer to let you oppose me or the healing of the lost will. So you need to get to know yourself at least enough to allow yourself to clarify your intent. If you have intent to heal, you will not go wrong. It is not right time for you. Be honest enough to let yourself know it. False healings can be more damaging than just accepting your lack of readiness, because false healing will take you into areas that you are not ready to accept or understand. This has the potential for big reversals. When you heal or how fast you move is not to be made into another status symbol, competition for superiority, or race for position. There are many old misunderstandings that are going to come up around this healing. These misunderstandings were questions originally that became judgments in premature attempts to answer them. Some of the questions are: is oldest best, most experienced, and most wise? Is the oldest closest to me? Is closest to me favored over farther away? Is more light better or superior to less light? Is color of light ordered in preference according to speed of vibration? Is guilt necessary for love to have a conscience? Is having a conscience necessary to be loving? Is it possible to live without having to go forth and experience the self? Is it possible to have essence without form? Is it possible to have spirit without will? Is it possible to leave everything behind except for spirit and heart? In summary, I would like to say that you have to feel guilt's presence. There is no way I could delineate guilt in all of its subtle forms. In general, I can say that guilt opposes the evolution of the light, and there is movement involved in evolving the light. Evolutionary movement may mean slowing down at times and speeding up at other times. Guilt holds you back from doing what you want to do, saying that what you want to do is not the right thing to do. Guilt has been able to use all of your fear that you are not right to do what you want to do. When the will is fully accepted, there is no room for guilt. Guilt has been able to occupy the places where the will has held back from free expression by the fear that it was not loving for the will to express it, if it meant that another might not like what the will had to give. The healing of this fear is what needs to take place now. Denying the guilt and then behaving as though you no longer have it will not work. I have seen the reversals that take place when guilt is denied, and you will experience one sooner or later if you're not really healing guilt. I cannot delineate a foolproof method to let you know if you are denying or not either. You are going to have to feel the presence of denial also. The will is invaluable and needs to be recovered now. You cannot get along without it. In the next book, you are going to see some orders of spirits emerge that intend to prove to me that the will is not necessary, and you will find that they are the warriors I have mentioned already. They have a lesson to give that needs to be understood now. They have intent to kill the will and get rid of everything that reminds them of it. They have to go off Earth because Earth is the will polarity planet of my creation. They need to go before they kill the Earth or make it so hard for the Earth to heal that the Earth gives up her desire to recover. You need to understand the warriors have a huge presence of lost will with them that needs to be given a chance to recover before they go. In some ways, this is a perilous race against a ticking time bomb, but get going is the important first step. The warriors have to go outside of me, and that is why I do not want any lost will that wants to be freed to have to go with him. It is important to feel the parts of you that wanted to kill the will, so you wouldn't have to feel what the will was making you feel. You can start by realizing how much you like to numb out your own pain, because pain is a result of your own imbalance and nothing else. Hatred for the mother is the most prevalent emotion among the warriors, and they have many murdering rapists in their ranks, even though they will all venerate an image of the mother and say that they worship it. This does not mean that they are all Catholics, but it does mean that they seek to murder subtly here, because frozen images are not allowed the vibration necessary to sustain life. Women who have tried to emulate this imagery are slowly committing suicide. The feminists are their angry fragments who know their survival is threatened. Balance must be found here, but it will not be found by going out and throwing the warriors down and doing to them what they have been doing to others. The rage that wants to do this is moved out into a fragmented form also and opposes the warriors who champion the father as warriors who champion the mother. These warriors have an air of black magic about them that has continually fueled the father warriors to believe they are fighting a just cause. Neither side can win, and if they make a serious attempt, they will both lose their lives. This is why you must understand that lost will must be healed within the ones that created it. If you have not found yourself in an emergence yet, You may have too much will blockage to recognize yourself yet, or you may have emerged in the will-body polarity, which I have not yet covered. These spirits are not warriors. These spirits emerge to complement the spirit-heart polarity. Given to any emotion you have around not finding yourself in this book, no emotion that you can accept in yourself now is a wrong emotion to feel. There are many things you do not understand yet, and how the will polarity managed to survive as yin in the creation that has been so polarized to yang, and so insensitive toward the true nature of the yin is no small issue. Even religious and cultures who have claimed acceptance for the yin do not understand the true nature of the will. There is no way I can put all that you need in one book, or any number of books for that matter, but I can give you what you need to learn on your own. What the will polarity needs now is to be triggered by not receiving yet what they have for so long wanted to receive from me. The will polarity has cried out for me to speak to them, and I will not leave them without me now. But the spirit polarity must get moving first, because the will polarity is responsive, and the response they have to give cannot be given until the spirit polarity makes room to receive it with love this time. If you have rage, fear, and grief over this, do not hold it back now. If you need to rage at me for not speaking you directly, do not hold it back now. If you need to throw the book down and declare that you're never going to read another line of it, allow yourself to do this. If you're afraid that either the book is crazy or you're going to go crazy trying to understand it, allow yourself to go into the terror that you have here. Many have terror that they could not understand me and chose to turn away from me, rather than risk being overwhelmed by a terror they believed they could not handle. You are going to have to move terror around what the next book has to say anyway. Please understand that terror can move and is not something that can be held anymore. If you have any ability to feel terror, allow yourself to feel as much as you can move at any one time, because terror is the most difficult emotion to move of your own volition. Usually something has to terrify you. At least let it be something of loving intent that terrifies you this time. Terror has been identified as only possible in response to something that has a death to give you. This is not wrong, but old terror must move so it can balance with rage. This balance is where you will find the strength to save your life. Allowing terror to move means allowing light into it and moving out the guilt that says you are wrong to be so terrified of death. The desire to seek life has to allow itself to move away from death. Anything literally frozen in terror cannot save its own life. I have given all that I can give now. If you feel that I have left many things unclear, or if you have any unsettled feelings, please allow movement here. I have reason for everything I have done, including triggering the feeling that this book is either too much or not enough, or not clear enough to get you going. Rage is the bottom line here. Along with the terror you hold that even in your rage you are powerless to find a way to heal yourself. There is hopelessness in the lost will also that does not believe healing can ever really come. If you feel this, allow it. Rage often holds back in the fear that it will play its last card and not succeed. Rage hates the terror for reminding it of this. You are going to have to experience this healing to know that it is not wrong. If you have preference for denying this information, it is not right time for you. If you have intent to seek life, but have a feeling that this could not really be the way, remain open. Right time can come at any moment. There may be many times that you will want me or someone to tell you what to do next or give you an understanding you're sure you need. Feel your fear and anger, your rage and terror here as much as you can first, because more often than not, feeling it more brings the information you need. Someone else may be able to give you some help at times, but no one else can do this for you. You have to take responsibility that is yours now and allow me to give you what it is my responsibility to give. I am a loving God, but you need to understand that it is not always loving the way you have defined love in the past. I am the highest vibration there is, but speed is not all there is to being the highest. If speed was all that defined me, Lucifer would be God in my place. I have something to say now to the people that must have something else move first before they can go ahead with their healing. You need to have something else move first, and your response will be what heals you. If you have a response to anything I have said here, do not allow yourself to move it in any place that does not feel safe for you. If you have no safe place, you need to move the fear that there is no place that has acceptance for you first, before you push past it with the right feeling. There is no way that you really have no right place, but you cannot find it if you have no acceptance for yourself. Many will polarity people, and body too, have tried to be something else because of the way they have been denied their right place. This may have trouble recognizing themselves at first because of this. The presence of lost will has also made it hard for the will polarity to feel good about itself, because lost will gives the reflection of will holding judgment rather than the reflection of the will itself. Another understanding you need now is that you have had conscience within me for a long time before you emerged, and you need to work with what is getting triggered around this. If you have rage at the feeling of being held back here, you have the Spirit's rage at feeling held back by the will. The will does not have a feeling of lack of self-acceptance on its own. It has to receive this feeling from the Spirit involved. You will understand this in time. I am not going to explain it now. I intend to end now by giving you my blessings and saying unto you that I have love to give to all who have desire to seek love from me, and that healing intent is the reason why I am now speaking forth as I am. If you have intent to heal, you will find the loving presence within which you can heal. Opening to receive love is the gift that healing the will brings to you. Love is the will's response to receiving love. When you love all of yourself, the reflection around you will be all loving. When you accept all of yourself, the reflection will be all accepting. Selah.